If anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single psychic who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that they are able to read minds. And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single astrologer who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that they can predict future human events by interpreting celestial signs. And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single homeopathic practitioner who's been able to prove under reasonable experimental conditions that solutions made up of infinitely tiny particles of good stuff dissolved repeatedly into relatively huge quantities of water have a consistently higher medicinal value than a similarly administered placebo. And if anyone can show me one example in the history of the world of a single spiritual person who's been able to show either empirically or logically the existence of a higher power with any consciousness or interest in the human race, or ability to punish or reward humans for their moral choices, or that there is any reason other than fear to believe in any version of an afterlife, I will give you my piano, one of my legs, and my wife.
Hello, and welcome to Reason. Today is Sunday, January 9th, and this episode is entitled 30 Degrees Outside, Yet 70 Degrees in the Studio. I think that pretty much seals the deal on global warming, don't you? I'm Joshua Billingsley, along with Paul Whitmire.
How you doing?
And this podcast is coming to you live from sunny Buffalo, New York. Reason Podcast is a weekly discussion of events, current and historical, from a skeptical, rational, and non-theological perspective. Reason Podcast is brought to you by The Offensive Atheists and the atheist community of Buffalo and Western New York. For further information, please visit our blog and website at wnyatheist.org or email us at reason@wnyatheist.org.
Tibetan Buddhism and the Resolution of Grief. The Bardo-Thodol for the Dying and Grieving is a paper written by a Robert Gose, and it was published in a journal called Death Studies.
Death Studies?
Yeah, Volume 21, Issue number 4 of Death Studies.
That sounds grim.
So, John, you and I determined that this was, I guess, falls under the category of anthropology.
Yeah, I think anthropology.
Basically, what this is it is a discussion of the incorrectly named Tibetan Book of the Dead, and what the general procedure for at least Tibetan Buddhists, the general procedure for what happens when someone dies. And it is a complicated sort of affair.
Well, as that sort of thing will tend to be, I'm assuming there's something to do with probate. Is there a lot of probate in Tibet?
I don't think they use that term, no.
Okay.
No. What does happen is there is apparently a 49-day period where they keep the corpse around and go through all of these...
What is this with these religions that keep the corpse around so long? Okay.
Well, the Jews got to bury it within like 3 or 4 days or something like that.
Which seems kind of reasonable to me. Sure. You got to get rid of that thing.
Well,
plus, it was very hot and dry,
right.
So...
Unlike Tibet.
Yeah, Tibet. No, definitely not hot and... Oh, wait. Damn it.
Well, what they do burn a lot of incense, and this is to shepherd the spirit or consciousness out of the body, or perhaps to cover up the smell. So,
well, spirits do dislike incense to a degree that no one can possibly imagine.
Yeah. Okay. So the Tibetan Book of the Dead is an incorrect name for what is the Bardo-Thodol for the Dying and Grieving. Mm-hmm. And actually, when I say Thodol, that's not right. There's a pronunciation key in this paper. There was an R and a G in there somewhere. I just pretty much gave up on it. It didn't make any sense to me. I could not pronounce it. It's like Thorgulsnog.
Them foreigners with their consonants.
I'm just going with Thodol. That's what we're doing. You got a problem with it? Call in and tell me what the correct pronunciation is. So this starts off with basically a parable of an interaction with a peasant person and the Buddha. And the story basically goes like this. This is what I'm talking about is the Book of the Dead and its purpose and point. And the parable it kind of opens up with is This Kisa Gotami was a woman who had lost her firstborn son. So she was grief-stricken and clutching the body of her deceased son. She roamed the streets looking for medicine or an antidote that would restore her son to life. And she goes up to the Buddha. And the Buddha listened to her pleas with compassion and says, quote, I'm quoting the Buddha, but, quote, go enter the city, make the rounds of the entire city, beginning at the beginning, like you do.
Beginning of the city, sure, that makes sense.
And at whatever home no one has ever died, from that house fetch tiny grains of mustard seed. So she goes from house to house, trying to find, this mustard seed from the home where no one has ever died. And she soon realizes that the task that the Buddha had imparted her with is impossible.
So there was no brand new construction there with families that had just moved in for the first time?
No.
None of that was in, okay, just checking. I thought there might be.
Yeah, no, that's actually not the case.
Okay.
Apparently, everyone in this city had someone who died. So she realizes that the task the Buddha had set out was impossible, and so she goes back to the Buddha, and this was a lesson imparted to her to try and teach her about the impermanence of life.
Seems reasonable.
Sure.
A little jerky though, isn't it?
Well, with these parables. The Jesus had a lot of parables and Buddha parables, okay, the greater lesson of life being impermanent, that, everyone has experienced or will experience this thing that you're going through and blah, 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 is, that's fine. If this story is actually true, if this, fat bald guy actually sent some woman,
he was actually really, really skinny. The fat guy's a Bodhisattva or something, Bodhisattva.
Sure.
I'm just saying.
I'm going with fat bald guy for the parable. It's a parable. So, the fat bald guy or the really skinny guy or whatever, actually sends this woman around to do this thing carrying the dead body of her child, it's kind of dickish.
It really is. It reminds me of any number of parables that I guess the lesson is probably good, but the story itself makes the person, sort of teaching the lesson a bit of a jerk. Yeah, a little bit. Yeah. So this, the paper goes on to talk about what the purpose of the Bardo-Thodol is for the Tibetan Buddhists. It does say that there is a common Western misconception that Tibetans do not fear death. I never had that misconception. Neither did I.
I would assume that.
Well, I guess they're probably saying there's a misconception that Buddhists, because of reincarnation and the whole kit and caboodle, probably don't fear death as much as people who. Well, of course, if everybody thinks they're going to heaven,
exactly.
It's very few people you meet that claim to be Christian that don't think they're going to heaven. So, it's just kind of peculiar that there would be a misconception there, but who can say?
One of these podcasts, we're actually going to figure out why your mic keeps cutting in and out.
I think you do it on purpose to make me look the fool.
Well, I do.
That's my theory.
I mean, if that is the reason, then so be it.
I can't argue with Paul's will.
Yeah, but what you were saying reminds me of the comedian Doug Stanhope's line, who says, "If you really think that you're going to heaven, then why are you wearing a seatbelt?"
Or why is the Pope in a Pope-mobile?
Exactly. So, but turns out, yes, at least according to the author of this paper, the Tibetan Buddhists do, in fact, fear death. Buddhism, as Josh and I are going to talk about a lot tonight, Buddhism is one of your more, at least in America, I'm going to say it's one of your more popular chosen religions. I do not know anyone who was born and raised by a Buddhist family, but I know a number of Buddhists. I actually dated a Buddhist for a while.
Was it a white middle-class person?
It was.
Oddly enough.
Upper middle class, yes.
Yeah, that seems about my experience as well.
Yeah. So, and everyone seems to choose, and I think Buddhism is something that a lot of people turn to when you have the realization that, the Holy Trinity, the Virgin Mary, and the church ceremony and all that seems like kind of just, that doesn't seem right. But I want to have ritual ceremony worship, and Buddhism seems like a nice turn to this idea of, I want to say that everything is sacred, and I know you're going to talk about this in much greater detail, but this idea that, you shouldn't harm anything, you should be peaceful, loving, and blah-blah-boo. It seems like a natural tendency for people to turn that way. But at any rate, the one of the things that people mention about Buddhism is its lack of deities.
That's a big problem I have. Is there's like 7 different schools of Buddhism.
Yeah.
And the one they're talking about with the lack of deities, that's Theravada Buddhism. That's the oldest, the one probably taught by the Buddha.
Sure.
It's also one of the smallest. There's also Mahayana Buddhism, which is known as Big Boat Buddhism, because they thought they were important in its duty. And yeah, they stole some gods from some neighboring religions and things.
Plus, alliteration's really nice.
It really is. But, the Theravada Buddhists are the ones that don't have a deity,
Right.
and virtually nobody practices that. All the cool stuff you see on TV, that's all Mahayana or Tibetan, possibly Zen, which is a spin-off of Mahayana, but not Tibetan or not Theravada, not the one that you think you're practicing. You're probably just wrong.
Yeah, and as I've been putting on Facebook and Twitter all week, the Richard Gere's and the Uma Thurmans and the Tina Turner, surprisingly.
Tina Turner, really?
Yeah.
What's love got to do with it? Well, apparently nothing, because it's all temporal and impermanent.
This is actually the case, yes, and also a second-hand emotion. So, but, okay, so, blah, 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 blah. So just talking about, the point I was getting to, as I got sidetracked there, is, in fact, there are gods, in at least Tibetan Buddhism. In fact, they have Yama. Yama is the ferocious god of death. All right, that's cool. And Yama has a consort named Chamunda who personifies the fierce energy of Yama. Okay, so that's just to get to the point, the justification and explanation that people have given me for choosing Buddhism, and it's how it doesn't hold these beliefs and these magical floofy, but rather it's just a system to live your life by. Well, I think Yama may have a slight objection to that. So, and as I said, the Tibetan Book of the Dead was misnamed. It was misnamed by an American scholar, because, we're guilty of everything, named W.Y. Evans Wentz. The reason why he called it the Tibetan Book of the Dead was he was modeling it after the concept of the Egyptian Book of the Dead. But, it's not. It's not the Book of the Dead. It's actually, something like the best translation would be, teaching tool for transformation.
Well, that does seem reasonable. Who doesn't want a teaching tool for transformation?
Right, exactly. So it contains 2 sets of instructions, actually. It contains a root verses for the deceased and instructions to the reader, or who would be in the case the Lama or teacher or family member who are overseeing this 49-day ritual of corpse watching, and we'll get to that. So this book is. It's basically, a set of instructions that you're supposed to read to the dead body. And you read them to the dead body, and this offers guidance and instruction on how to let go of the personal attachments that the sometimes referred to as spirit, but more literally translated as consciousness, is hanging on to in the material world, and the person is supposed to, when they're able to release the binds of the tangible world, is when they can finally enter into the cycle of rebirth or extinction.
Isn't that the whole gist of Buddhism, though? So by the time you die, shouldn't you already have at least a handle on that?
You really should. You really should. But apparently, this book just kind of send you over the edge. And there actually is some discussion about that, because what they talk about is, yes, you can learn the practices and teachings of Buddhism and the Buddha and all of that, and follow along, really internalizing that and having an understanding. But when you die, you apparently do not have all your mental faculties about you. So you're kind of lost. And the last thing that they want is for you to make a mistake. And if you lived a whole life of goodness and greatness, they don't want you to burn that in your last 49 days and wind up being reincarnated as a grasshopper or whatever.
Well, that does seem unreasonable.
Because you, without your mental faculties after you died, weren't able to continue on, and you held on to this this tangible aspect of life. So that's what the entire point is, that this book is an instruction manual for what to do after you die, and it's supposed to be read to your body after you die. So it describes a couple of rituals. So the body is covered, except for the crown of the head. Loved ones often set up a small shrine consisting of pictures of the Buddha, teachers, deities, things like that. The body is rolled onto its right side. Mm-hmm. Now, this is important because it imitates the posture of the sleeping lion in which the Buddha died. Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
Don't lions often sleep on their bellies?
You want to go argue?
I mean, I guess they sleep on their sides as well, but always their right. Well, maybe that lion was sleeping on its right side.
Yeah, sure.
I don't know.
If you want to argue with the lion about that, that's fine. The posture of the sleeping lion allows the blocking of the karmic winds of delusion and speeds the process of bodily dissolution in the death process.
That seems like a good idea.
Yeah, sure.
I guess.
Incense is burned as an offering and, as the paper says more practically, to cover the odor of body decomposition. Mm-hmm. Okay, so these funeral rites, you put the body in this position, roll it on its right side, cover it. Don't allow any animal skins around because animal skins actually have a tendency, and we'll get to the evidence that they have a tendency to do this. Animal skins have a tendency to trap the consciousness or soul.
Oh, in the animalism, in the firmness of the world, or in the? Did I go out again?
You went out. Now I'm gone.
What are you doing to me, Paul? You and your technology. I should go back to Ludditism.
It's all a disaster.
Well, it just seems strange to me. I guess it does make sense though that the animal skin, the lower form of incarnation that you could have been in the past, would hold your spirit to the earthly realm as opposed to allowing you to transcend and go off into Buddhahood somewhere.
Oh yeah,
enlightenment of some variety.
The evidence that they have for this is incontrovertible. So we'll get there. I'm assuming you can hear me now. Yeah, that's one of those. We start off the new year with equipment problems aplenty.
I blame you.
Yeah, maybe we'll solve this by the time the Mayan calendar runs out.
Yeah, if we don't, who cares?
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, so the body's put in this position, and the rites go on for 49 days. For 49 days, the body sits there. They read these various things to the body as instructions, read aloud for 49 days, and it's just kind of really absurd because, okay, so the entire lesson of the Bardo-Thodol is to allow people to lose their grasp of a false sense of themselves. So they want you to stop struggling to hold on to your past life. And here's where we get to where I start to have a really big problem with this, which is it is difficult, according to the paper, according to the Book of the Dead, it is difficult to leave things unfinished or to let go all the things cherished in life. Mm-hmm. They don't. The departed are often frozen in their attachments and fears. The deceased grieve for their former lives and loved ones. I don't know what the hell they're saying here. I don't know what the hell they're saying, and I don't know what evidence they have to support any of this.
Well, I would assume they don't have any evidence, but they're probably, doing something along the line. I mean, Buddhism is supposed to be giving up your earthliness. You give up your wants, you give up your desires. You love someone, well, you don't really love them. It's a vague veil that you put over reality, that sort of thing. It's probably a last-ditch effort to get rid of all the love, the love of food, the love of people, the love of life, of breathing, of activity, all those things that you were holding on to, being alive.
Yeah.
Give up the last vestige of that so that your soul can go on to, giving up, it's the Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path. It's a very specific business.
Yeah, it's a nice story. I mean, it is great how they talk about the purpose of all of this is to, relieve these burdens that the deceased has, but it's just a made up story.
Well,
and for that they keep the dead body around for 49 days. They read all this stuff to it, and okay, so here's a couple of more things on this. Offerings of barley and butter are placed at the head of the corpse. The Lama instructs the deceased on how to break attachment to the body. The Tibetan Buddhist tradition maintains that the clairvoyant consciousness of the dead person is 7 times clearer than the consciousness of a living person.
7 times?
7 times clearer.
Does the 7 and the 49 have anything to do with each other? Out of curiosity.
Maybe. I mean, 7 times 7.
That's what I mean.
Those are numbers.
They are, and they're related.
Yeah. They're both numbers.
We humans like 7. Yeah. And 49 seems like just a little bit more 7 than 7.
So it's just, I just don't. What does that mean? The clairvoyant consciousness. Number one, clairvoyant consciousness. I don't know what that means. But
Well, yeah.
Number two, 7 times clearer in a dead person. What the hell does that mean? Okay, but it just the Lama invokes blessings of the Buddha. He looks for signs or physical indications of the complete transference of consciousness from the corpse. Let me read that again.
Okay.
Physical indications of the complete transference of consciousness from the corpse. What are those physical indications?
Yeah, that's my question. Do they tell you? Do they say?
No, there's no indication, and boy, wouldn't that be great? We could finally put to rest this whole atheism thing if we could actually find the soul or the consciousness, disattached from the
We
body.
have a really good line too for declaring people dead. So, like for medical science, this would be very, very useful.
Yeah, it would be. It'd be great, but no, there's no indication as to what those physical indications are. So, what are you going to do? After the 79 days is over.
49.
Yep, 49. After the 49 days is over, sorry about that, now is time to finally dispose of the dead body.
Finally.
And they do it one of 4 ways. This is all laid out in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This is the procedures that you're supposed to go through whenever someone dies. If they ever have a plague or like the people are going to be very, very busy.
They're going to be, they're probably going to do it in packs, pack a room full of corpses.
I guess,
all
yeah.
on their right side.
I guess that's
and
it.
then start reading.
I guess that's how you do it.
I'm saying, that seems just practicality.
Okay, so the family consults an astrologer who correlates birth and death times with other astrological factors to determine a precise moment for disposing of the body.
Okay.
So that's what an astrologer can tell you. And there's 4 ritual methods of disposing of the body. There is a sky burial. Mm-hmm. There is a ground burial, cremation, and a water burial.
Okay, these all sound very sweet and peaceful. What are these burial types?
Yeah. Okay, so cremation is reserved for the incarnate lamas.
Okay.
Or for during the winter months.
Which seems reasonable.
If it's cold, I guess.
Well, you keep warm around the corpse.
Sure, that's what you do. So, so ground burial is rarely practiced, except if there's a case of contagious diseases, and sky burial, far my favorite.
Sounds fantastic.
And incidentally, the most popular, the most likely burial method is sky burial.
All right.
And here's what they do: the corpse is cut up and fed to vultures, who then take it up into the sky and bury it.
The Buddhists don't know about gravity, isn't that?
Or poop.
That's what I'm saying. It's going to come back down to Earth at some point.
Well, they haven't really thought that far through the process, I guess.
The Buddhists are not thinkers.
They cut it up, feed it to the vultures, and then, they're done with it. They wash their hands of it. So, yeah, the sky burial is, and the paper does go ahead to point out that of course, the sky burial seems just absolutely horrifying to kind of a Western sensibility, but they have a whole different thing going on. They give the bodies to the food as vultures. It becomes a final act of compassion, and they actually keep the vultures at bay until a proper time. Slices of the body are cast upon a rock, and they're mixed with like barley and honey and stuff like that. And the reason why they say that this is to prevent the vultures from fighting over the corpse and injuring each other. It's nice. They're considerate of the vultures.
So they slice the corpse up?
They slice the corpse up and they mix it with barley and flour and different stuff in order to keep the vultures from getting hurt and eating your loved one's body.
Right. Well, it is a fairly compassionate religion. Be good to others and the like.
Yeah. So the entire purpose of all of this, according to this study into the Book of the Dead, is these are instructions to establish guidelines for the proper emotional expression of grief. Mm-hmm. And all cultures do this. They have this to some extent. They have a pattern that you're supposed to follow and that you're supposed to adhere to in the death of a loved one, so that you can properly mourn and then move on. And this Tibetan Book of the Dead is really no different. It's doing the exact same thing. It's like I follow an instruction book because I don't know what to do because I'm so messed up myself. So yeah, I mean, just these practices. The couple of more points I wanted to add is the most powerful time, and just getting to the conclusion here, the most powerful time to perform ritual practice for the deceased is during the first 21 days. Specifically, 21 days, also a multiple of 7.
Indeed. Wait, it's 21 days before you begin, and then it's 49 days altogether?
No. After the person dies, you have the 49-day window, but the most powerful connection is within the first 21 days.
Okay, so you need to get started within 21 days, but you need to be done within 49 days.
Yes.
Okay, but this all makes sense.
Yeah.
This is all perfectly reasonable.
And the reason for this is that this is in the period that the deceased has his or her strongest links with the living. Again, we're just pulling stuff out of our ass all over the place here.
But it seems that, the closer you are to being alive, the stronger your link with the living. And 21 days is as good a number as any, I guess.
So in conclusion, the purpose of all of this, the presence of the reincarnated lamas within the Tibetan Buddhist community, increase the faith of the lay practitioners and provide assurance that the teachings are effective. This Bardo-Thodol affirms spiritual direction for the dead and for the living, and it is a method for transcending both death and grief. So this is, these are just some of the practices of at least Tibetan Buddhists. Mm-hmm. And these sort of things, what I started this whole thing off with was this idea that people choose Buddhism, at least in a Western culture, at least in America, people choose Buddhism because on the face of it, it seems to rely a lot less on the, magical man in the sky, froofy crap. But it's just, these are the same things that every culture has come up with, every religious culture has come up with, in order to explain the unknown and offer some sort of control over these grand ideas of life and death and, what happens to you. This is all just, again, explanations for what happens after you die. The Buddhism is no different than Hinduism or Catholicism, Christianity. These are all, ways to make us feel better about the unknown. And if those ways are keeping a dead body around for 49 days and then feeding it to vultures, I'm not going to criticize.
Hey, whatever floats your boat, whatever peels your banana.
If that's your thing, yeah, that's all right. Good deal. So that's just getting back to the title, the Tibetan Buddhism and the Resolution of Grief, the Bardo-Thodol for the dying and the grieving. Okay, so we had a comment about the paper. Let's just click over to our friend Paul here, see what he has to say.
All right, Paul.
Now, hopefully this will all work.
I'm sure it will, like clockwork.
Hey,
Are you
Paul,
there, Paul?
There?
Of course it's going to work. It'll work perfectly.
You have more faith than I do. Paul, a man of faith.
You had me on the sky burial thing right until you got to the trapping me up and feeding me to, pretty much anything.
Paul, can I stop you right there?
Yeah,
Are you talking on the Bluetooth again? Is this your game?
Yeah, you're really hard to hear.
All right, hold on.
Oh, we'll hold on. Don't worry.
Yeah,
the time in the world.
Yep.
So, Paul, how you doing?
I'm doing all right,
Well, that's nice.
Yeah, you're a little bit better. Go ahead, Paul.
All right, well, I'm trying here, but I'm on a cell phone in the parking lot, so.
Like you do.
I also have to pick on you guys a little bit right there for embarrassing me in the grocery store just now, because you made me crack up and look quite insane in front of other people, so.
Oh, good.
Totally your fault, though.
What was that about?
Well, it was just some of the where Josh usually chimes in with his snarky remarks, and it got me to laugh out loud in a grocery store, and everyone's staring at me. So,
well, you should tell them that you felt the power of the Holy Spirit, and you let it take you over, and that was the joy of God. And if they have a problem with it, they're going to burn in hell.
Either that, or you could just go, "I'm not crazy. I'm hearing things in my ear."
Actually, I think I'm going to go with Josh there. If I did finish off with an amen, I probably could have got away with it.
Yep, yeah, absolutely. So
now let's kill some heathens, and they'll be on board.
Yeah, and then we can contemplate at that point whether or not we'll give the heathens a sky burial.
Yeah, the sky burial sounds just so nice, like a sky burial. Wow, that sounds enlightening and sounds cool. And I'm just thinking, if I had a soul and it was still in a body, the chopping up process just sounds horrific.
That does seem problematic.
Yeah, well, they lovingly, they actually there's instructions in the Book of the Dead about you start at the rib cage and you work your way out in small chunks. Again, mixing the body parts with flour and honey in order to kind of make there be enough for all the vultures that may have collected in the 49 days that you've kept the rotting corpse around your house.
Wouldn't you feel bad if you were if only one vulture came to eat your corpse? I feel really bad about myself.
Yeah. I mean, really would.
You'd be like, one vulture, that's all I get?
Not even the vultures like this guy.
Seriously.
All right, Paul.
So there's recipes for vulture barbecue. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I was thinking about trying it with pork, as an experiment.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Yeah, maybe tasty. We'll see. We'll see if we can get some vultures around the studio here. All right, Paul. We're gonna move on, but thanks for giving us a call. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, guys.
All right. So, moving on to things we are doing. I guess you can probably figure out at this point that we're talking about Buddhism.
We are indeed.
We're talking about Buddhism, Hollywood, Tibet.
Siddhartha Gautama.
The Dalai Lama.
Dalai Lama.
So, we came up with this idea, this topic, and, at first I was like, is there really going to be enough for us to talk about regarding this? And then, like anything else, once you start looking into things...
Oh, research is my bane.
Yeah.
There's just so much.
So, we'd be happy to entertain any caller, so long as they're not calling from a Bluetooth. If we can hear you and you call from a Bluetooth, that's fine. But, if you want to join in the discussion, have anything to say about Buddhism, if you are a Buddhist, oh my God, we would love to talk to you. So give us a call. It's 424-243-9589. And we also have the chat room open. We have a couple of people in there chatting about various things. Somebody said something about having holes in themselves. I'm not really sure what's going on.
Somebody else is talking about throwing their body over the falls, which seems reasonable as well. That would be a sky water burial.
Oh, that's nice. You can fold both of those in.
It's a twofer.
Yeah, actually, I didn't even get to the water burial, which is essentially the same thing. They cut your body up in little pieces and throw you in the river instead of feeding you to
fish eat you.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's nice. It's very sweet.
It's good to feed
some to the vultures, some to the fish,
Yeah.
You spread the wealth.
Okay, so like I said, we're talking about Buddhism. We are going to move forward to just talking about some current events. As you can, you may imagine, there is a couple of things regarding Buddhism in the news. I know, Josh, you were going to talk about one.
Yeah.
My choices were either to do the same article that you did, which would be, a fun, interesting time, or just talk about, some of the more general current events.
Sure.
I chose it since recently was the Iowa caucus, the Republican Iowa caucus. There's and now they're moving on to someplace. Where is it at the end of this week? Someplace.
It's New Hampshire.
Okay. Right.
No, they did a fantastic job. They spread the seed of Santorum all the way across that state.
It was nice.
There's Santorum everywhere. Everybody was saying, we want Santorum. It was fantastic. Yep. I was very pleased with that.
Santorum lost by 8 votes or something.
Yes.
Always coming from behind.
Yeah, there was a little bit of that.
And just, if everyone is wondering about Santorum, number one, Google it.
Yes.
And number two, if you think that the meme that has been created around Rick Santorum's name is harsh, then you might want to look into some of the things he's espoused in his political campaign.
You can actually pull up the gentleman that started the meme. Is it Dan Savage?
Yes,
it's Dan Savage, who got really annoyed and started this meme, and people went berserk with it, and it's fantastic. And let me tell you, people went crazy for Santorum.
Yep. Yeah. Like you do.
Yes.
Okay, but just talking about the news article I have is from the CBS News, cbsnews.com, and it is entitled, Republican Candidates Decry War on Religion. I wanted to talk about this because every time I turn on, if I'm listening to NPR or listening to any sort of talk radio anywhere, except for myself,
yes.
They're talking about how people are questioning, people who are Republican Party members involved in the Republican primary are questioning the candidates about what they're going to do about Barack Obama's war on religion. And it drives me friggin' nuts every time I hear it. So what they're talking about is questions such as, when you get into office, a question to Mitt Romney or to Newt Gingrich, something like that. When you get into office, what are you going to do about the Barack Obama's war on religion? Our children can't even celebrate Christmas anymore.
Nope, it's prohibited.
It is prohibited. In fact, they don't even allow them to celebrate Christmas on Christmas Day in the public schools because they're closed that day. Because it's a national holiday.
A national holiday?
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Well, you can't celebrate a national holiday. The government is fighting against it.
Yep. Government Jeff, that's who's fighting against it.
Oh, yeah, it's government. I blame Government Jeff.
Yep. Blame it all on Government Jeff. Okay, there's Gingrich is quoted as saying there's a lot more anti-Christian bigotry today than there is concern on the other side. None of it gets covered by the news media, which is strange because I'm hearing it on CBS News, I'm hearing it on NPR, I'm hearing it everywhere. These jackasses talking about the war on religion. So again, Gingrich. Actually, no, I'm sorry. This is. Did Romney say this? Yeah, Romney. Should the Catholic Church be forced to close its adoption services in Massachusetts because it won't accept gay couples, which is exactly what the state has done? Okay. No, it's not. Not even close to what the state has done. The state has said, hey, Catholic Charities, you can't be bigoted assholes. You cannot refuse to allow homosexual couples to adopt children through your adoption services if they are funded by federal and state tax dollars. You cannot do that. Catholic Charities' response was, oh, screw you, we're closing our doors then. The state of Massachusetts and the federal government had not at any point said to Catholic Charities, you have to close your doors, you have to stop your adoption services.
No, they said that you have to stop your federally prohibited discrimination.
Yeah.
That's it.
They said you need to, do more adoptions. You need to allow adoptions to occur for gay couples as well as straight couples. Mm-hmm. And they never said you had to close. So this is just, false. A lie right on the surface of it. It's a lie right along the lines with, our children today are not allowed to celebrate Christmas. So, when we see this administration not giving money to Catholic Charities for sexually trafficked individuals because they don't agree with the Catholic Church on abortion, and that is a war against religion, and that's going to stop under a Perry administration. That's a quote by Rick Perry. Who's saying that we're not giving monies to Catholic Charities to help stop sexual trafficking because they don't agree with the Catholic Church's position on abortion. It's just absolutely, these are lies. These are all lies. They're making this straw man, this false argument. And I'm curious to see when it actually comes around to the general election, Barack Obama is going to have to defend himself against a lot of these. And I'm curious to see what he's going to say other than...
Look.
Yeah, he's going to say, well, now look, you're making stuff up. That's what you're just simply making stuff up.
Lies and the lying liars who tell them.
So, and the last quote here, and then we'll move on to your news article, is a quote from Mitt Romney. He says, as to whether he would oppose a state effort to ban contraception, Mitt Romney says, quote, I would totally and completely oppose any effort to ban contraception, and there's no state that wants to do so. Mm-hmm. So he doesn't want to ban contraception, and this falls in line with this idea of separation of church and state, which they purport is their position.
Well, they really want separation from church and between church and state.
Yeah.
When they want it, and not when they don't. They always talk about, no, we want to keep the separation. We want to get rid of the separation because God should be in politics, except not your God. Yeah. Only my God.
And the separation of church and state argument does not have any effect on the whole Catholic Charities adoption issue. That's their point. You're telling the Catholic Charities that they have to allow gay couples to adopt children. That violates the separation of church and state. No, that violates the anti-discrimination laws. You're discriminating. That's the difference there. So I'm sure as we get into the general election and as we get closer and closer to all this, Josh and I will get progressively more and more annoyed and upset with some of the crazy things that these wacky Republicans.
As the show goes on, we'll move more from reasoned debate and more into political punditry. I'm sure of it.
And it's probably the case.
Sadly true. But people start screaming about people lie and lie and lie, and there's just so much you can do about it.
This is really true and really annoying. So, all right, well that's from the CBSNews.com, but like I said, it's pervasive. You can see it everywhere. The Republicans and their war against Barack Obama's war on religion.
The war against war.
Yep.
That's a war I don't think that is going to work out that well.
Work out about as well as the war to end all wars.
Yes, that did work out. Armistice Day, the end to the war to end all wars, except for the next World War.
We're not counting that one.
No. Well, I've got an article here from Reuters, dated today. It's fairly interesting. It dips back into the whole Buddhism thing. The opening paragraph is, 2 people in an ethnically Tibetan part of southwest China set themselves on fire on Friday, an advocacy group said, bringing the number of self-immolations in protest against religious controls imposed by the Chinese government to 14 since March. 14 people have set themselves on fire to protest the Chinese outlawing Buddhism, which they haven't done, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
Which I find amusing because people start setting themselves on fire for being, Seventh-day Adventists. I could see the government outlawing that. That's not a good argument tool.
Well, not only that, but it actually doesn't fall in line with the air burial or the water burial or the ground burial. Oh,
it's
cremation. It is cremation.
Yeah,
okay, all right.
So they think they're lamas. They become lamas by setting themselves on fire.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Yeah, my apologies. You're right. They are practicing within their belief.
Yes, indeed.
Don't set yourself on fire. What the hell's wrong with you?
That's when it comes down to it, if you set yourself on fire and you sit there and burn, I say more power to you. That's somebody with way more willpower than I have. I say you go ahead with your bad self.
It just seems very hot.
It seems really unpleasant.
Yeah.
Well, apparently witnesses saw the man set himself on fire near the Kirti Monastery in Alba Prefecture in Sichuan Province around 2:50 p.m. local time. London-based Free Tibet said in an emailed statement. Now, other Tibetans who have set themselves on fire in the past 10 months, most of them were Buddhist monks, nuns, and, some other clergy. Mm-hmm. They were calling for freedom for Tibet and the return of the 76-year-old Dalai Lama, who fled to India in 1959.
Yeah, they really want the Dalai Lama back.
At least 6 of these cases have been fatal. And although if you set yourself on fire, I'm not sure you don't want to be fatal, because that seems like a horrible way to live your life.
Yeah, you don't want to do that one halfway.
No, once you've set yourself on fire, you've really gone whole hog. Wow,
all right. And, just to sneak in here, something that I remember reading about. There was a Buddhist who objected to the Vietnam War. It was back in 1968, 1969, and I think it was at Harvard or some Ivy League school. He set himself on fire.
Yeah.
And then realized quickly that was a bad idea and immediately ran to the fountain and jumped in the fountain.
Yeah, it's never the same after that.
Yeah.
Some doors you can't go back through, buddy.
Yeah.
Ouch. But China's foreign ministry has branded the self-immolators as terrorists and has said the Dalai Lama, whom it condemns as a supporter of violent separatism, should take the blame for these immoral burnings. Now, this does seem like if you're going to protest, this is the kind of terrorism that doesn't hurt anyone. I mean, it's clearly better than like a suicide bomber. So, yeah. I mean, you're hurting yourself, and that's I guess fine. That's your prerogative to do so. I will say though that this is a far cry from a pacifist movement. In March of 2008, deadly riots against Chinese presence spread across the Tibetan Autonomous Region and the Tibetan regions ahead of the Beijing Olympics, triggering some fairly vicious confrontations with the police and troops. So, I mean, the Tibetan Buddhists who are, they're a very weak group. They're doing the whole thing. It's, they're not entirely this passive and oppressed minority. They do have the capacity and the propensity for violence. It's just good that, 14 people decide to kill themselves since March as opposed to kill other people. So that's good.
Yeah, this idea that they're that Buddhism is a completely non-violent thing, falls in line with the same idea that Buddhism is that they don't worship gods and deities. It's all this very, very nice kind of soft, on the surface understanding of what Buddhism is. But there's violence going on in all religious sects, and this is no different.
Well, Christianity proclaims to turn the other cheek, and love thy neighbor, and do all those other things.
Turn the other teat, huh?
Turn the other teat. Yes, there's two teats. You go from one to the other. That's the way they roll in Christianity.
That's math I understand.
That's right. That's why Jesus wasn't wearing a shirt on the cross.
Okay. Neither was Ricky Gervais.
That's right. But that's about it for this. I mean, it's just a report that this is continuing to happen. I know we all have the Rage Against the Machine album with the burning monk on it. This is something that apparently it's trendy for them to do. Doesn't seem to be the most politically advantageous mode of protest, but
no.
It does get headlines here again in Reuters, and I guess if that's your deal, you should just keep that up.
As far as trends go, man, I don't know. Why don't you piss off your parents and get a tattoo and a piercing or something? Like, lighting yourself on fire as a trend doesn't seem like, I don't know. It seems absurd to me. And again, this is all in protest of the Chinese occupation of Tibet.
Speaking of the Chinese occupation of Tibet,
yeah, we're gonna get there. It's something the Beastie Boys object to, greatly. But we're gonna move on here. We have somewhat of a new segment that we're adding. We're gonna do this, and then we're gonna move on to some history regarding Tibet and the whole story there. Now, this section, as a nod to Mr. Tim Minchin, who is playing at the Reason Rally, which is very very exciting. He in his 9-minute beat poem Storm, he talks about how his wife looks at him at one point with the fear that he might start into one of his rare but fun rants. Well, I'm going to rant a little bit here, and what I'm going to rant about is our podcast Facebook page. Okay? So, Josh and I, since we started, have been, putting various news articles up there, pictures, just whatever we think of as we go along through our day. And, more and more people are kind of checking that out. If you do check it out and like it, you should hit the like button, because that would make us happy. But the other day, I put something up. I was just, I was doing some reading, doing some thinking about the podcast, thinking about the Jesus and the whatnot, and, just thinking about the Bible in general. And so I decided to put a post up called "Because I've Read Your Bible, Part 1, wherein I quoted Exodus 25, which states, "You shall not bow down to them or worship them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing the children for the sins of the fathers to the third and the fourth generation of those who hate me." And
that's pretty vicious stuff.
Counterpointed that with a quote from the movie The Untouchables. Al Capone. I'm going to edit this a little bit, as we're a family show, but I want you to get this blank where he breathes. I want you to find this Nancy boy Elliot Ness. I want him dead. I want his family dead. I want his house burned to the ground. I want to go there in the middle of the night, and I want to piss on his ashes. Okay, that was my post. I was comparing the quote from Capone from the movie The Untouchables, not a quote from the actual Al Capone, to Exodus 25. This idea that God is kind of a dick. Punishing the third and the fourth generation, really? Okay.
The number of things my grandparents have done, I got to tell you, that I don't know about, I don't want to be punished by an all-powerful deity for those.
Right. So, I had a comment on this, and the comment came from a Michelle Casey. Now, I'm saying Michelle Casey's name. You put it on our Reason Podcast Facebook page, and so, sorry, you're fair game. The comment that I got was, "This doesn't seem appropriate or necessary." There's no context, there's no statement as to what this means at all. But my problem with this is clearly two words, appropriate and necessary. This doesn't seem appropriate or necessary. So let's talk about necessary for a second. It's Facebook. None of it is necessary. It's our Facebook page. We can put on there whatever we want. It's not life or death. Josh, has anyone died from your inability to post something on Facebook?
Not that I know of.
Has anyone died from you doing anything related to this podcast? So none of this is necessary. So don't sit here and tell me that this is not necessary. Now, the thing that your second statement of this doesn't seem appropriate, there's no context there, and I don't know what you mean, but appropriate in what sense? Is it inappropriate for me to put up a quote on my own Facebook page? Does it violate some of the rules of Facebook? No, it doesn't. I've checked it out. There's absolutely nothing that says that I'm not allowed to post up a part of the Bible and compare it to the Untouchables. So, appropriate? I don't know. I don't see where you're going. Now, I think, and there's no information here, I think that what's happening here is you're saying that the Bible is a sacred cow. Or, perhaps, the Untouchables is a sacred cow? Who can say? But either way, you're criticizing me because I'm comparing the actual text from the Bible and pointing out how ludicrous, absurd, and horrible it is. And for that, you decided to say that I'm being inappropriate because I may be offensive to a certain group of people who believe in this crap. Well, I don't believe in this crap. Josh doesn't believe in this crap. And I believe that I have the right to post up on the Facebook page anything I like. And will continue to do so. And that is my complaint this week.
Indeed, Paul, indeed. Now, calming down for a moment. I know that got you worked up. I did want to spend a couple of minutes, probably more than a couple of minutes, discussing Free Tibet. I'm going to do a little bit of background about this fantastic Shangri-La known as Tibet and how wonderful it is and peaceful and everything. But like Paul knows, I belong to the school of people that believe that modern history began somewhere around 1350, so that's where we're going.
Sure.
The years preceding the coming of the Lama system were filled with bloodshed and war between the varied sects of Buddhism. Rape, murder, torture, arson, this was the usual tactic of the monks against rival temples. In the 13th century, Kublai Khan, the ruler of Mongolia, China, and Tibet, created the first Grand Lama, who was to preside over the other lamas like a bishop, like the Bishop of Rome over the other bishops, like the Pope. Years later, China sent an army into Tibet to support the rule of the Grand Lama, who then renamed himself Dalai, or Ocean Lama.
It's a nice name.
It's like Catholic, all-encompassing. It's this grand, huge thing. That
all-encompassingly.
I am the Dalai Lama. I am the ocean of lamas. And put him in as the ruler of Tibet. This new Dalai Lama then retroactively deified the two prior incarnations, the leaders of his sect going back to Kublai Khan, declaring himself the third Dalai Lama. The third Dalai Lama seized other monasteries, destroyed Buddhist documents, which differed in interpretation, and conflicted with his claim to divinity. The Buddhas, who followed him, because Dalai Lamas are all Buddhas, lived opulent lives with mistresses, partying like secular kings. I mean, it's really fantastic, the lifestyle they were living.
They were in charge. They were the ruling class. So.
Exactly. So much like the Pope in the Catholic Church for quite a long time.
There's some benefits to that.
It benefits to power. The next few hundred years, different sects continued to wage war with each other. In 1660, the fifth Dalai Lama was faced with a rebellion from a rival sect. This Lama called for harsh repercussions and directed the Mongols, who were, the military force in the area, the Mongols, to kill all the men and women and their offspring, quote, like eggs smashed against the rocks. The Mongols were asked to, quote, annihilate any traces of them, even their names. Right, so that sounds a lot like the Book of Joshua, if you ask me. In 1792, opposing monasteries were forcibly converted to the Yellow Hats. Now, that's a colloquial name for the Dalai Lama's sect.
Yellow Hat?
Yes, they're like Galug, something like that. I get it mixed up because the Soviet Galugs. So it's Galug, but I'm going to call them the Yellow Hats. This period also saw the first contact with Jesuits and Capuchins from Europe.
Ooh, who are Capuchins?
They're Catholics. No big deal. And this began the relationship of Tibet with the British. By the 19th century, the situation of foreigners in Tibet grew more tenuous. The British Army was encroaching from northern India into the Himalayas. The Emirate...
Is this really happening again?
Yes, I think that it is. The Emirate of Afghanistan and the Russian Empire were expanding from Central Asia, and each power became suspicious of the other's intentions. In 1904, a British expedition to Tibet, spurred in part by fear that Russia was extending power into Tibet, invaded Tibet. The British hoped that negotiations with the 13th Dalai Lama would be more effective than with the Chinese. This began the period of real European interference in Tibet, beginning in the last century. In 1910, the Qing, Q-I-N-G, Qing government, I hate losing my spot. The Qing government sent military expeditions of its own under Zhao Erfeng to establish direct Chinese rule and deposed the Dalai Lama in an imperial edict, the Dalai Lama then fled to British India. Zhao Erfeng defeated the Tibetan military conclusively and expelled Dalai Lama's forces from the province. However, his actions were unpopular, and there was a lot of animosity against him in the mainstream civilians, the local government, that sort of thing. Then there was the Zhai Revolution, and I apologize for anyone who speaks Chinese, and I'm horribly butchering the names of these things, but it's Xinhai. I'm calling it Xinhai Revolution in 1911-1912.
That's fine.
It toppled the Qing dynasty in China, and the last Qing troops were escorted out of Tibet. The new Republic of China apologized for the actions of the king, and offered to restore the Dalai Lama's title. The Dalai Lama refused any Chinese title and declared himself ruler of an independent Tibet in collusion with the Mongolians. So it was an independent Tibet, this time with the Mongolians backing them militarily as opposed to the Chinese, as they had in the past. Now, for the next 36 years, the 13th Dalai Lama and the regents who succeeded him, because if you're underage, a regent, the Dalai Lama's born sort of a god. The regents look over things until the Dalai Lama gets old enough. For the next 36 years...
You don't want like a 3-year-old running the country.
Right, that does seem unreasonable. There'll be a lot of toys.
I want Tonka trucks.
The Dalai Lama...
It's the 14th century. We haven't invented trucks yet.
We're in the 20th century here.
Right.
Keep up, The Dalai Lama and the regents who succeeded him governed Tibet. In 1914, the Tibetan government signed the Simla Accord with Britain, ceding South Tibet to the British India, and the Chinese government denounced this as illegal. When regents in the 1930s and 40s, our newest Dalai Lama, the regents over our newest Dalai Lama, mind you, displayed negligence in affairs, the Kuomintang government of the Republic of China used this to their advantage to expand their reach into the country. Here's where things get interesting. In July 1949, in order to prevent Chinese agitation in political Tibet, the government of Tibet expelled the Chinese delegation, the nationalists, those were loyal to China. In November 1949, it sent a letter to the U.S. State Department and a copy to Mao Zedong, and a separate letter to Great Britain declaring its intent to defend itself by all possible means against the People's Republic of China, the troops incurring there. In the preceding 3 decades, the conservative Tibetan government had consciously de-emphasized its military and refrained from modernizing. The new and fairly hasty attempts at modernizing and enlarging the military began in 1949, but, China's a big country. They had a lot of troops to begin with. It was too late. India, gave them some money and some stuff to buttress the effect, but it was no thing. In 1950, the 14th Dalai Lama, who was 15 years old at the time.
This is our guy. This is the current guy.
The current Dalai Lama. Hadn't attained a majority yet, so the regent, Taktra, was the acting head of the Tibetan military and the Tibetan government. So that's when the Chinese came in and took over. So that's when they became enslaved. Now, let's look at Tibet under the Lama system. Until 1959, because there was quite a lot of back and forth from 50 to 59, but as of 1959, when the Dalai Lama last presided over Tibet, most of the arable land was still organized into manorial estates worked by serfs. The estates were owned by 2 social groups. There was the rich secular landowners and the rich theocratic lamas. So basically it was owned by, lords and the clergy.
Yeah, and this is where it starts to get interesting.
Right. This is Drepung Monastery, which was the largest and one of the biggest landowners in the world. With its 185 manors and 25,000 serfs, 300 great pastures and 16,000 herdsmen. This is the Dalai Lama, sworn to poverty, that sort of thing, like the Pope. This is his monastery. The wealth of the monasteries rested in the hands of a small number of high-ranking lamas. Most of the ordinary monks lived, fairly modestly and had no direct access to great wealth. But the Dalai Lama himself lived richly in a 1,000-room, 14-story Potala Palace.
Oh, sounds nice.
It does. Secular leaders were also pretty well off. The commander-in-chief of the Tibetan military, a member of the Dalai Lama's lay cabinet, who owned 4,000 square kilometers of land and 3,500 serfs. Old Tibet has been misrepresented by some Westerners as again, a Shangri-La, a nation that required no police force because its people voluntarily observed the laws of karma. Truth of the matter is, it had a professional army, and granted it was a small one, but the army itself functioned mostly as the gendarme. And if anybody's not familiar with that term, that is basically a secret police force that kept that the landowners used to keep order, to protect their property, to hunt down runaway serfs, that sort of thing. Young Tibetan boys were regularly taken from their peasant families and brought into the monasteries to be trained as monks. Once there, they were bonded for life. The monastic estates also conscripted children for lifelong servitude as domestics, dance performers, and soldiers. In Old Tibet, there were a small number of farmers who subsisted, a kind of a free peasantry, perhaps an additional 10,000 or so people who composed the middle class. That's, families of merchants, shopkeepers, and small traders. There were also thousands of beggars. In fact, they had a tremendously large quantity of beggars, and for good reason when you actually get into the internal politics of it. There were also slaves, who were usually domestic servants, who owned absolutely nothing, and their offspring were born into slavery. Mm-hmm. So this is the utopia, the Shangri-La that Tibet was. So this is what we can say. This is the system that they had.
A Shangri-La full of serfs
and slaves,
and a theocratic elite.
Yes, and a military elite.
So
it sounds like a military church complex.
Okay.
The majority of the rural population were serfs, treated little better than slaves. The serfs went without schooling or medical care. They were under a lifetime bond to work the Lord's land, or the monastery's land, without pay, to repair the Lord's houses, transport crops, collect his firewood, whatever. They were also expected to provide carrying animals and transportation upon demand. Their masters told them what crops to grow, what animals to raise. They weren't allowed to get married without consent of their lord or lama. They might easily be separated from their families should their owners lease them out to work in a distant location. As in a free labor system, and unlike slavery, the overlords had no responsibility for the serfs' maintenance. And this is where serfdom, fiefdom for that matter, gets really interesting. No responsibility for the serf's maintenance and no direct interest in his or her survival as an expensive piece of property. So it wasn't like slavery where they owned these people, they had, an economic investment in them. No. These people are just disposable. The serfs had to support themselves, yet, like in a slave system, you're bound to your master. Granted, you're dehumanized, a number of other things, but you're guaranteed a fixed permanent workforce. So these people, a slave is guaranteed survival for their life.
Okay.
Because they're owned as property. A serf, not so much. So a serf is bound to work for free their entire life, yet their lord has no economic incentive to keep them alive.
That's a pretty good deal.
Well, that was the difference between serfdom and slavery back in medieval Europe as well. It was, for the lords, not for the serfs, mind you. For the lords, it's the best of both worlds.
It's like having a car. You don't have to put any gas in the car.
That's right. You just get out and pick up another car, and that's fine.
Yep, that's how that works.
The serfs were, and here's where it gets interesting. And this is how, serfdom continues and why they owed so much money. The serfs were taxed upon getting married, taxed upon the birth of each child and every death in the family. They're taxed for planting a tree in their yard, for keeping their animals. They're taxed for religious festivals, for public dancing and drumming, for being sent to prison, and for being released from prison.
Now, just to make clear, and I know, I just want to illustrate clearly, what you're talking about here is the Tibet previous to the Chinese occupation.
Yes, this is the wonderful Tibet that we all think is a Shangri-La, peaceful utopia where everybody was happy from the laws of karma, and the Dalai Lama reigned as a peaceful, enlightened despot that brought love and happiness and satisfaction to the land.
Beautiful, beautiful orange robes. That's
They really are.
It's very nice.
It's kind of like the Catholic Church with those really fantastic robes.
Mm-hmm. Everyone loves a good robe.
Now, those who could not find work were taxed for being unemployed. If you traveled to another village in search of work, you paid a passage tax to go from village to village. When people could not pay, and here's the kicker, When people could not pay, the monasteries lent them money to pay their taxes.
Oh.
At between 20 and 50% interest.
That's a good deal.
That's a fantastic system. And they have debts that are handed down from father to son to grandson. Debtors who couldn't meet their obligations risked being cast into slavery. So, you kept being a serf as long as you possibly could, simply because, otherwise your family can go into slavery. Now, in 1951, following a military conflict, Tibet was incorporated into the People's Republic of China, and the previous Tibetan government was abolished in 59. Now, between 51 and 59, quite a few things happened. Immediately upon the annexation, the Chinese did very little to influence the lives of the average Tibetan. They built some roads, a couple hospitals, a water treatment plant or two. We can assume the worst, that these were put in place just to butter up the general populace, the poor people that couldn't get clean water.
Sure. That's
fine, but they did this. They did not mess with the internal politics of Tibet between 1951 and 1959.
Okay, for 10 years, the Chinese came in and they just basically said, well, we're going to fix you up a little bit. We're not going to mess with your politics.
Right, we're basically going to leave you alone. Dalai Lama, still the king. All the generals, still in place with the gendarme, your little military. You can keep all the stuff. We're just cool with that. We just own you. Now, in and around 1959, now this is during the West's battle against the evil communist scourge.
That's a scourge.
Yes, the CIA funded a group of wealthy landowners and lamas in a coup against the Chinese. Mm-hmm. The rebellion was the rebellers were trained, and it was orchestrated by the U.S. government. These the aristocrat rebels were dropped into the country to raise a rebellion. Now, 90% or more were never heard from again. Now, this is records from the CIA, so I'm not conspiracy talk. This is from the CIA. They trained and financed a rebellion in Tibet, which failed miserably.
Using the aristocrats.
Yeah, well, nobody else wanted to do it. That was the problem. The general public, the general populace, the serfs, the slaves, the beggars, the subsistence farmers, and the low-level monks did not participate in the revolution, didn't participate in the rebellion at all. So this kind of pissed the Chinese off.
Well, yeah.
I understand the Tibetan aristocracy was worried the Chinese were eventually going to get around to a little bit of redistribution of wealth, as communists are wont to do. But they hadn't done it thus far. So, between 1959 and 1951, the Chinese clamped down. They turned huge swaths of land into farmland for the people. The Chinese abolished slavery, which, the Tibetans did not like. And the Tibetan system of forced labor under the serf system. They eliminated the hypertaxation of the poor. They started work projects and greatly reduced unemployment and beggary. And they refer to this as beggary, the profession of begging for a living.
Work.
They established secular schools and constructed running water and they established secular schools and constructed running water and electrical systems. The Chinese redistributed the land and the shepherding monopoly to the populace. So agriculture and raising of livestock, they took it away from the rich folk.
Just to interrupt you there for a moment, I did at least figure out what the problem is. Your mic isn't grounded, so it's building up a static charge, and eventually it just shuts the whole thing down. Problem we can fix.
Okay, fantastic. This is good news for everybody. The remaining clergy, because again, they allowed the clergy to continue even after the communists came in. Even after they started cracking down, let the clergy continue, but, they took away all their excess land and redistributed it. So the remaining clergy were forced from their fantastic and opulent lifestyle. They were made to exist on a modest government stipend, making extra money doing weddings and funerals and the like. So keep in mind, the Chinese did not outlaw practicing Buddhism. No. Communist country, they don't like the God and that sort of thing. That's fine. They still didn't outlaw and even gave a stipend to the Buddhist clerics. Right. So, they're still not being as prickish as they could be. Now, since he left, the Dalai Lama has claimed that 1.2 million Tibetans were dead because of the Chinese occupation.
That's a lot of Tibetans.
That really is a lot of Tibetans. Even more so when you consider that the 1953 census of Tibet, 6 years prior to the crackdown, had the population at 1,274,000. So I don't know how much breeding they did in those 6 years, but that's just incredible they make the claim. I mean, there are other census reports from other international agencies saying the population was as large as 2 million.
Still,
1.2 million out of 2 million, that's more than 50% of the population.
Yeah.
It's a mammoth genocide, and it boggles the imagination.
Yeah, 60% of the population just gone. That would be a gigantic
60 to 90% of the population.
Yeah. Anyway,
I have a little bit of trouble believing that particular number, but he's got a political position he's trying to defend, and I guess that's that. Now, the Chinese claim to have put an end to, and these are all things which were legal under the Lama system in Tibet. The Chinese have claimed to put an end to floggings, mutilations, amputations. These were all common. Amputations. Yeah, they did eye gouging and they cut off hands.
Yeah, I read about the eye gouging.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. The Chinese have themselves, of course, been accused of severe persecution and brutality by the Tibetan exiles, but those are Tibetan exiles. They've clearly got, they've got an agenda just like the Chinese do.
Yeah.
Now, during the Great Leap Forward, under good old Mao there, the Chinese did participate in forced collectivization and grain farming, often to disastrous effects. So, I mean, there was probably some famine, some problems with food, so probably a lot of people did die. They had a lot of trouble with the, quote, Great Leap Forward. The Chinese were no saints.
Anything with that name, like Great Leap Forward, I don't know, like, it sounds Orwellian, sounds 1984-ish, it sounds Third Reich-ish, it sounds like Ubermensch, it sounds like, it's not a good name.
Right. Well, they're all about, fancy schmancy names, and, they sound good to the people inside. People on the outside think it's creepy, I guess.
Yeah.
Tibet, before the Chinese took over, during the 36 years of self-rule,
mm-hmm.
And during that 36 years of self-rule, keep in mind, they were getting money from the British and they were getting money from the Mongolians. So they never really had self-rule. But that's neither here nor there. During their 36 years of self-rule, they were a theocratic dictatorship, and they used the idea of karma to subjugate people. Slavery and mutilation were common, punishments, and beggary was rampant.
Right.
The argument that was presented was that if you were a beggar, if you were poor, that's because you did something bad in a prior life.
Right. It's very convenient.
I was rich. I was born, as one, not the Dalai Lama, but a Lama. I was born that way because I was good in a former life.
It's really a great way to excuse entitlement.
It really is. It's fantastic. So I just have to say that the Shangri-La ideal of Tibet is pretty much akin, in my opinion, to a well-crafted propaganda piece against the evil scourge of Chinese communism. Both these groups, the Tibetan theocrats and the Chinese, they were jackasses. But we all know from decades of public service announcements, that sort of thing, that the commies are evil, and this is part of the substantiation of that political meme. Look what the communists did to poor Tibet.
Right.
Poor, theocratic, oppressive, mutilating, slave-holding Tibet. Poor them.
Well, the communists are evil. I mean, you don't need to look any further than that last Indiana Jones movie where he rode in the refrigerator when the atomic bomb went off. I mean, I think that illustrates the evils of communism. But yeah, this free Tibet.
Yeah.
I think that first entered my consciousness with the Beastie Boys.
Yes, the Beastie Boys.
They were all about Tibet. I think they still are all about Tibet. I never really had a good explanation as to, why we needed to free Tibet, except for the fact it was stated, well, they're under an oppressive communist regime from China. And no one really ever addresses the question of, so is the average Tibetan better off before or after the Chinese occupation?
Well, one of the interesting things is that Tibet has the same rule that China has with the limited children.
Mm-hmm.
So you're limited to, in Tibet, only 3 children. In China, it's 1 or 2, depending on if you have a firstborn woman or boy or girl, and depending on which province you live in, to be perfectly honest. But
a little sexist, but
it is a little sexist, but so in Tibet, you can only have 3 children. Now, what happens if you have 4 children? That child gets no free health care. Because in China, since they're communists, they have to provide some free health care, and they pay for the birthing of the baby. So you don't get that. You also don't get to use them as their equivalent of, it's not quite like this in communism, but the equivalent of a tax write-off.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not the evil, horrible thing. In fact, in China, it's not that much different.
Right.
It's just not cheap to have a baby. If you want to have an extra child, you can, The government will fine you and will not give you any kind of tax relief.
And this
you can have the child. I mean, people think that the Chinese government comes in if you have an extra child and like suffocates in the bathtub. No.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, far cry from the impression that I was given, which was that, third child, they drown in a bucket. That's the end of that. Like, no, that's not the case.
It's not how these things ever work. Why do people demonize people to such an extent? The Chinese regime is really unfair. They're a bunch of jackasses. They do terrible things. They don't drown babies.
No.
Why do you believe this? Why do people believe? But that's what people believe. They're doing horrible, horrible things. Oh, I do want to say, just as an aside, in case anyone thinks that I'm a crazy, paranoid lunatic.
I think you're a crazy, paranoid lunatic.
The U.S. government wouldn't do anything like that. That'd be terrible. Why would the U.S. government try to bolster up, a fascist theocratic dictatorship just because we don't like commies? Well, I don't have any real evidence as to the whys or hows, but I will say that the U.S. government, by way of the CIA originally, and then through channels like the, quote, National Endowment for Democracy, pays $1.7 million to Tibetan exiles. The Dalai Lama's annual paycheck is $186,000. Your tax dollars, $186,000 of them, go as a paycheck to the Dalai Lama.
Right.
He works for the United States government.
And that is, in addition to that, he's getting all of the donations in Hollywood. They throw fundraisers, and they do the whole thing. Again, Richard Gere, Tina Turner, Uma Thurman. Uma Thurman's father, apparently, was a Lama, and that's why she's involved in the whole thing.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. It's a little absurd.
It really is, especially the National Endowment for Democracy, considering that Tibet was a theocratic dictatorship. And the Tibetans, the ones that speak loudly, which are, of course, the exiles, the ones that used to be wealthy landowners, they all want to go back to the system the way that it was when they got military support from Mongolia against China and military support from Britain against China, as opposed to getting military support of China against everybody else.
I guess.
I'm just not sure. It's just sad that people fall victim to this propaganda piece so easily and so openly. Who else is on the Free Tibet? Bono. Bono likes Free Tibet.
Yeah, Bono's really...
You too, Free Tibet. All these people want to go back to a theocratic dictatorship.
And they also want to go back to, if not in practice, at least the ideals of serfdom. Of a ruling class, a theological ruling class.
That's the thing about Buddhism, and it inherited this from Hinduism, because Buddhism, of course, is a spin-off of Hinduism, is that the karma. In Hinduism, they have it's pretty laid down. There are castes. You're born poor, you will live poor, you're going to stay poor your whole life.
Yeah.
You're born rich, same thing. I mean, it's very similar to the aristocratic idea we understand from Europe, except more set in stone. Well, keep in mind, that's the cultural inheritance that Buddhism has. Yeah. If you're born poor or missing a leg, if you're born ugly or not charming, or you've got some sort of disease or disorder, that's because you were bad in a former life.
It's your fault.
It's your fault. All the bad things that happen to you are your fault. The ones you can't control, still your fault. Yeah. It's a kind of, it's an offensive and kind of really insulting belief if you accept it that way. I mean, Theravada Buddhism, the original branch of Buddhism under the Buddha, did not talk about this. All humans were considered equal. That was one level in the reincarnation pyramid. Above human was, Buddha. Mm-hmm. Below human was, like chimp or something. So, they actually believed this, but as soon as it was put into a religious order until the Mahayana Buddhists or the Tibetan Buddhists or the Zen Buddhists took over, as soon as they did that, they immediately said, well, there are different classes of people. Your class, that's because of what you did in a former life, which is not at all what the Buddha said. So, go back, read some of the Buddha, and find out that none of the powerful, I'll say, Buddhist beliefs around reflect anything close to what Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, he actually said. Much the same as you look at Christianity, it doesn't say anything similar to what, Jesus said.
Right. And, one of the points I want people to take away from this is there is very little connection ever made in the general public about the fact that when you're saying Free Tibet, when you're on board with the Beastie Boys and Bono's train there, and all you're doing is substantiating the evils of communism position that we've had since the end of World War II. That's where that comes from. It's that is, why we're all gung-ho about free Tibet, why we still have a blockade against Cuba, or at least initially had a blockade against Cuba.
Yeah.
The reason why we still have a blockade against Cuba,
I don't know,
is because those exiles, the Cuban exiles in Florida, they're still the Cuban exiles.
Again, the Cuban exiles, a bunch of rich aristocrats that left Cuba because Castro took away their land. So, again, I say a biased position. I'm not saying Castro was a nice guy. I'm not saying that Mao Zedong was a nice guy. I'm just saying that it's a propaganda piece because we hate their political structure. We try to make them into demons.
Yeah, we really do. We really are against... Our ruling class is really afraid of the idea of the redistribution of wealth. And, if you think it's a good idea, if you think it's a bad idea, whatever, but it's important to understand that a lot of this comes from simply the people with the money being afraid that somebody's going to come to take their money. And that is, one of the reasons why we're so afraid of communism. And our propaganda machine, the information that we get into the general public comes trickled down from the top, from the people with authority and power. So...
Yes, indeed. All right. Well, hopefully that covered, and I apologize about going all the way back to the middle of the 13th century.
Well,
but,
context.
It just seems to me that, they were slaughtering each other and killing each other over petty religious disputes as long as Christians were.
Yeah.
Everybody that says Buddhism is different in one way or another hasn't read a history book. They've been slaughtering and killing each other like the Protestants and the Catholics, or the Catholics and all the other people, the Gnostics. You don't hear about them because they got killed.
Yeah.
Same idea as the Buddhist system in Tibet, at least. Although it's actually pretty common in a lot of other places. Buddhism has been used as a fairly powerful tool for war in much of Asia, but that's neither here nor there.
Well, Tibet in particular is this hot button issue with the American populace. So, all right. Well, there you go.
Free Tibet. Sorry. Yes. Where are we now, Paul?
Well, we are moving forward, assuming you're wrapping up your position on free Tibet.
I may spit out a rant or two or a complaint or two as we go along, but I'm going to try and hold it back.
Okay, so moving on to You're Wrong, and let me tell you why.
Oh, goody goody.
Yes. So this week's topic is, Josh and I were discussing the... Well, okay, so here's how this goes. Everyone knows how this goes. You go to the gas station to get the gas or whatever it is you need, and there's 3 or 4 people in a line ahead of you, except for one of the people in line ahead of you has lottery tickets.
Oh, yes, lottery tickets.
If it doesn't make you angry, I don't understand. It is probably the most infuriating thing that happens in my day. And I have a job where I argue with insurance companies. So, but yeah, the lottery and the time and money spent on it is something that we're going to be discussing here. The topic is the library. The library.
Yes.
Yeah. The lottery provides for the public good.
Okay, that seems pretty straightforward. A positive statement of the lottery provides for the public good.
Yes.
So we're going to say the positive statement is heads, negative is tails.
Sure.
How are we going to pull this?
I will take the coin.
You'll take the coin. Okay, here we go. And it has fallen underneath my monitor. It is heads. You've got heads, sir.
All right.
The lottery provides for the public good.
Okay.
Okay, so you're the positive. You go.
All right, well, that seems pretty straightforward. The money that is collected from the lottery, because, we're all quite aware that the amount of money that's paid into the lottery nowhere near approaches matching the amount of money that someone could win in the lottery. So there's all this extra money around. Mm-hmm. And that extra money, as is laid out in the actual charter for the lottery, is that money is supposed to go for the public good. It's supposed to go for the funding of schools, I believe.
Schools.
A number of different governmental resources.
Primarily for schools, though, because they couldn't get away with passing it unless it was deliberately for schools. So
right,
the vast majority of it goes to schools.
And so I think, that's kind of the end of the discussion. The money that comes from the lottery goes to the public good. Because it goes to the public good, that's the intention of the lottery, that's the way it's set up, and that's where that money is ultimately going.
Okay.
So, I don't see what kind of position you could possibly argue against that.
The lottery is based upon people's ignorance. And the poorer you are, the more likely you are to play the lottery. The lottery is a regressive tax. It taxes disproportionately poor people over rich people, because poor people are more likely to play the lottery. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. I'm saying that's what happens. That's what has always happened. Back when it used to be called the numbers, run by the mafia, The exact same thing.
Well, yeah.
6 digits. They took it off the last 6 digits of the New York Stock Exchange. The mafia used to run the lottery until the states got involved. That's neither here nor there. That puts them in bad bedfellows, but doesn't say it's bad. It's a regressive tax, which means it disproportionately drains resources from the poorest and the neediest of the people. Not to mention the fact that, first off, gambling is an addiction.
Oh, so that's the argument you're going to go with? Okay.
I've got a three-pronged attack. Gambling can be an addiction. Gambling is an incredibly dangerous addiction because, first off, you don't ever get the economic you don't ever get the other resource out of it. You only get the high from gambling, which makes it, first off, very efficient, and secondly, incredibly economically detrimental to the people that are victims to it. It's the government deliberately subsidizing addiction. So we've got our first one. It's a regressive tax. Taxes disproportionately the people that need money the most. Secondly, it funds addiction, and they know it funds addiction, and they knew it funded addiction before they did it. So they've been deliberately trying to, again, afflict a mental illness on the poorest and the neediest of people.
Well, that's fine. That's a very lovely moral argument you've made.
I've got a third prong.
What's your third point?
Third point is, as soon as they put that money into education, they took the money they had already put into education out. They can't use the lottery money for anything else, but they can take the money that they had allotted for education and spend it someplace else. Someplace else like, I don't know, funding wars, someplace else like bailouts to Wall Street fat cats, or
covering up the water-powered car.
Yes, covering up the water-powered car. Also very, very big thing that the states have done. This is basically 3 ways of realizing that the pretense of doing something for the public good actually undercuts the public good. It's a deliberate sabotage to the less educated, needier, the poorer, needier, and those that desire a free education to be funded by the state, which is the mandate that the state has, which are usually the poor. I mean, rich people can go to private school. Poor people can't do that. It is a deliberate attack on poor people. There's a vast majority of poor people to rich people, or poorer people to rich people, that is a larger utilitarian-wise that is causing more harm than good. I would have to say depletes substantially from the public good.
All right. Well, I applaud your technique of throwing whatever you could at the wall to see what would stick.
3 prongs. 3 prongs.
You're this 3-pronged attack, which okay, it was starting. See, you can keep talking until all your points are lost, and that's fine. You haven't
I laid them out specifically. I can tell you again. My first point. First point, regressive tax.
Yeah, regressive tax. Your second point is the moral issue, and your third point was...
My second point is the government deliberately funding.
Your second point is the moral issue.
Addiction. Which is a medical condition according to the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association. It is a medical condition, and the government is deliberately subsidizing the depletion of people's sanity.
Yeah, your argument doesn't hold any water whatsoever unless you're going to argue that we also should make alcohol illegal and stop taxing it so the government can benefit off of that. Now,
Well, the government isn't selling alcohol. The government is selling lottery tickets, and they've got a monopoly on it. No one else is allowed to sell lottery tickets. So it also, just as a fourth point, it inhibits free enterprise.
All right.
It undercuts capitalism.
Your positions, 4 of them now, which I will defend against here.
I'm sorry.
That's absurd.
I'm jumping on top of you.
The moral issue is just ridiculous. I don't care if the government is selling them or if the government is simply benefiting off of the advertising money and the sales that are going through a private corporation like Smirnoff or whatever. It doesn't matter. Okay? Your position is still, I should control people, I should control what they do, I don't want people to do things that are inherently bad for them.
No.
Which is dictatorial and wrong.
That is untrue. That is a mischaracterization.
It is not a mischaracterization.
Is legally the sole entity that can promote gambling. So they are the sole one. I would like the freedom to open up a gambling salon or to start selling lottery tickets. I can't do that. The government deliberately stopped me from doing that. Your argument is this libertarian argument, which is untrue because the government is deliberately inhibiting the average American from running a lottery business.
That's absurd. That's absurd on the level of saying that we shouldn't have liquor licensing because the government is the same group which dictates who is allowed to sell alcohol and where.
licenses for selling lottery tickets.
Well, they do sell licenses for selling lottery tickets. Just
No,
because they're
they
framed
don't.
differently as being a license, the actual lottery tickets are sold, and profit is made by the convenience stores and various places that gas stations that distribute the lottery tickets.
Right,
So,
and the mafia used to make a lot of money selling the lottery tickets until the government encroached upon them. They destroyed free enterprise in that respect.
okay, that's an interesting theory. It doesn't actually even address whether or not the lottery provides for the public good, which I don't think you've refuted in any way.
It promotes my freedom and promotes gambling addiction. I'd say that takes away from the public good.
I say that when we're talking about the lottery provides for the public good, we're talking about it in a monetary sense. Now, the money that does go towards schools, you've made the unsubstantiated argument that the money that was originally going to go to those schools was funneled out and funneled into wars and whatnot. And there's absolutely no evidence to support that. The money that is collected from the lottery does go towards schools. Schools and education are the most productive use, the most valuable use of money in order to generate the public good. When we improve the schools, which is what the lottery is doing, we improve the public in general. The lottery serves as a way, it serves as a voluntary and secondary tax. It allows people to have the enjoyment of playing the lottery, maybe a chance at winning. Your chances are, like 1 in 3 or something like that. So you stand a really good chance of winning a bunch of money.
You did that with a straight face.
And on top of that, even if you don't win, you still win by contributing to the public good, by contributing to education and the benefit of society as a whole.
Just have to stop you there. I do have to say, your chances of winning the lottery, the pick six, 1 in 26 million.
Yeah, like 1 in 3. It's 1 in 26 million, 1 in 3. I mean, they're basically the same number.
Those are both numbers, yes.
Yes. So, I mean, and again, you're still benefiting even if you do not win. You're benefiting by the warmness and the cockles of your heart for benefiting society and the school children the way you are. Saying that there is any sort of moral argument against this is absurd on the face of it.
And I hold back to the fact that I did not make a moral argument. You, sir, are mischaracterizing and creating a paper tiger out of my position.
Your position is that it causes addiction.
The American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association both call gambling addiction a disease, and the government subsidizes it. I say that's open and shut.
They also call alcoholism a disease.
But the government doesn't directly subsidize it.
Yes, it does.
The government makes money off of everything, alcohol, tobacco, what have you. They directly subsidize this addiction by being the primary beneficiary of funds from this.
I see. You don't have a problem with the taxation of it. You just have a problem with something like, say the sin tax, where they actually tax alcohol to a greater extent than they do normal goods and services, based upon the fact that the government is going to benefit more off of this thing that is in a slightly moral gray area.
The government is trying to avoid alcoholism. They're trying to turn people away from alcoholism. That is the purpose behind the sin tax. Alcoholism, as the government accepts, is wrong. It is it's an addiction. And while they want to protect your freedom to drink if you like, they would like it to make it disproportionately difficult to do so by having a tax to discourage alcoholism, which is an addiction which goes in contrast to their position on the lottery.
I don't think it does. Number one, I think it's absurd to say that the government's actual position is that the purpose of the sin tax is to try and reduce the amount of dollars generated through tax revenue by people who buy alcohol. That's just flat out absurd.
There are a lot of people that quit smoking when the price went up. That stopped lung cancer, emphysema, heart disease, and difficulties during pregnancy. I saw that on a side of a cigarette pack.
Right.
It's bad, and the government has raised the taxes to the point where people are turning away from tobacco addiction. Therefore, they are actually succeeding, at least in this respect, with the sin tax to do what they desire to do, protect the public good, in contrast to what the lottery does.
Well, consider this. In addition to all the arguments that you've made, you need to consider, you substantiated that before the government got involved in the whole lottery business, it was run by the mafia. Okay.
Private enterprise.
Okay, that's fine. Now, currently, the lottery is under government control, it's under government regulation, it's fair, it's honest, the tax dollars go to where they are intended to go. And so this, in general, reducing the number of mob killings, just as an example of one of the many ways
that the lottery legalized gambling.
That the lottery is benefiting the public good. So if you want to say that they could just legalize legalize gambling, you're making, again, the absurdist libertarian argument of no regulation. You're saying that's fine. Your argument is essentially we should eliminate all regulation, that the market will correct itself, the free hand of the market, and that the mafia, for example, would stop their tirade of killings and all the bad things that the mob does over time would be eliminated simply
Look
by
at what happened in Vegas. That's exactly what happened in Vegas. Rich, wealthy people invested in gambling, and the violence shot through the floor.
Yeah. Well, that's fine. I don't think that you've disputed at all okay, Vegas. Vegas, your argument is fine for Vegas. Vegas has decided, instead of having it government regulated, which, by the way, it is.
Oh, it's regulated. It's just not a direct subsidiary of the government. It's like I can run my store. If the government comes in and says, we run your store now, well, that would be a government takeover. This is a government takeover of the gambling industry. They legalize gambling only to their benefit, not to my benefit. As free enterprise,
you can play the lottery, can't you?
I'm a capitalist. I would like to invest in a business that I could get a return out of. I cannot do this under the present system.
Okay, number one, you could invest in lottery tickets. Number two, I think your idea that a government-run lottery system is somehow different, other than in the amount of control that government regulation would put in, is absurd. My point is, if there's government regulation, there's government regulation. The lottery being run completely by the government, by an office set aside by the government to regulate how the lottery is won, is simply another form of government regulation, which you are apparently against.
I'm against the government taking over industry. I'm against the government, this government takeover of things like gambling. Imagine the government coming in and saying, all the casinos are now owned in Vegas. All the casinos are now owned by Nevada. You, corporation who has invested tons of money, you can't make a profit off this. No individual corporation who employs people can make money off this enterprise because the government's doing it now. This is shocking, it's disgusting, and it is against the American ideal. And you, sir, I think you, sir, are a communist.
Well, you can do those ad hominem attacks all you want, but it does not change the fact that it's for the public good.
The regressive tax that disproportionately takes money from the poor and uneducated to ostensibly give money to schools, which it doesn't do because it took all the other money out of schools.
Unsubstantiated.
And keeps the amount of funding for schools has not gone up since the lottery was implemented. That's substantiation. The fact that they're keeping this cycle of ignorance and stupidity so they can make a profit off of it, that in and of itself is disreputable, it's horrible, it's shocking, and yes, I am doing a false disgust. It is shocking and horrifying, and it's wrong, and it takes away clearly from the public good. And adding to the number of addicts that go to Catholic churches, sit in the basement, drink their coffee, talking about, "Hi, I'm Steve, and I'm a gambaholic." You know, that right there, that's even more shocking. It's also funding religions and keeping the churches in business, which is in violation of the separation of church and state. They do all those meetings in churches. I've seen it on TV.
That was a walk.
Oh, it's a little walk.
All right.
A couple feet, couple steps.
Yeah. Your argument of it being a regressive tax is absurd because it's voluntary. It is not disproportionately a tax against the poor.
It is.
No, it's not. It's disproportionately a tax against the people who are stupid enough to think that they're going to win the lottery.
And the poor have not received the proper education in statistics to make the determination that, oh, by the way, somebody's making money off this, therefore you will always lose. They haven't learned that lesson because they were inappropriately educated because of the poor schools, which have not improved since the lottery was implemented. And the lottery is a system of keeping the poor man down.
Yeah, and your implementation of this big brother attitude of we need to shelter the poor to protect themselves from themselves, i.e. make it the morality of gambling, the addiction of gambling, and all of that.
You're stuck on morality, aren't you?
You're refusing to admit that your position is a
because
moral
I'm
one.
I'm not saying that.
You are saying that. You're just not using that word.
You use that word, not me. That's all I'm saying. You're the one that's talking morality. I'm not. I'm simply saying logistically, pragmatically, and for the public good, this is not a system that is implemented properly. Let's say it could be implemented, open up free enterprise, allow gambling establishments, allow statewide, let Disney come in like they did in Vegas and set up the Disney gambling system. That'd be fine. That'd be wonderful. You're against that because you're pro the lottery, the state-funded, Stalin-esque lottery. Stalin-esque.
Okay, all right. Well, you walked away from your original position there a little bit, and that's fine.
I'm having a good time. That's fun.
I'm just saying the lottery provides for the public good. I think that's clear.
And I'll close up by saying the lottery is the biggest hindrance on the public good since I'm going to say public decapitations.
I don't know if that was a thing.
It was a thing somewhere. People do it.
Sure.
Saudi Arabia, they do that. I heard that on TV, on Fox News.
All right. Well, we want to know what you think. Email us at reason@wnyatheist.org. Okay, so the lottery.
Yes, indeed, the lottery. That's a good time. That was fun.
Yeah, I mean, I think your positions are pretty accurate. I actually, some of them I do have legitimate objections to, but on the whole, it seems like the lottery is not a good deal at all. But just
your problem with the gambling addiction?
Well, my problem with the gambling addiction is quite evident, but
I thought that was nice. It subsidizes addiction. I thought that was fantastic. That made me so happy when it popped into my head.
More to the point, it screws people, and you're never ever going to win. And I hate waiting behind you in line.
Yes. Well, I was going to go with the waiting behind people in line because that does take away from the public good. My good as I am the public.
Yep. I'm just trying to get to work or home from work or wherever. But nope. You got to buy your damn lottery tickets.
Yep.
All right. Well, you have a quote for us this week, Josh.
I do, and this is one that goes out to a good friend of mine, Paul Jedediah Whitmire.
That would not be me, but you're pointing at me.
I'm reasonably certain that's your name. And this is a quote from a Natalie Portman, a woman that you find ravishing.
I do like the Natalie Portman.
Who went to Harvard for psychology, by the way.
So she's a thinkerizer.
Thinkerizer with her thinker. She says, and I quote, I don't believe in that, the afterlife. I believe that this is it, and I believe it's the best way to live. Natalie Portman. Yeah, It's nice to see more and more people coming around to the fact that, hey, maybe we should not be planning for an afterlife, but more so we should just be here now doing the best we can. Yeah, you gotta take care of the people around you because, God's not watching, but seriously, there's a way to be a person, man. What's wrong with you?
Absolutely. Okay, well, thanks for staying with us to the bottom of another episode of Reason Podcast.
I'm going to say this one's 55 minutes.
Yep, 55 minutes. That's about right. Well, let's see. We have, it's been an hour and 41 minutes.
41 minutes. That's all? 41 minutes?
Yeah, an
that
hour
does seem reasonable.
41 minutes.
41 minutes.
41 minutes.
41 minutes.
Yep.
I'm sticking with that.
All right. So next week, we're going to have a new microphone for Josh.
Let's hope.
And we're going to be talking about ghosts and the supernatural. Ooh. And that should be a good time. Actually, where that came from, if anyone is familiar with who Jessica Alquist is, she is the, I'm going to say 16-year-old, who is trying, standing, at the beach trying to scream back the tide of religious fundamentalism in her West Cranston town. There's a prayer painted on the wall in her high school, and she's been trying to get that taken down because it's a public high school and it's absurd. Well, she had put up a post on Facebook about how they started talking about ghosts in one of her classrooms. And something like 16 out of the 20 students raised their hand and said that they believed in ghosts.
16 out of 20.
So we figured, Josh and I figured it'd be maybe a good thing to discuss and hopefully shed some reason on.
Indeed.
So, all right, until next week, farewell.
See ya.